So here we have philosophies, religions, and beliefs. What would you like to explore first? Something that involves altars, candles, prayers. That could be annoying from anything from religions that are new or old, like pagan bits and bobs. My friend once said to me a great phrase, one which I found absolutely spot on. Those who went through hell on earth choose spirituality. Those who fear hell choose religion. Not throwing shade on religions here, as some are quite decent and very much welcoming. But there are other things that make you wonder how much horrid things are still there. Cults. Yes, dear. Cults are still pretty much out there in the wild, being all frolicky, sweet-talking, and very off their rockers. Some of the documentaries made on the cults make you want to go into the letter A of the alphabet, which is arson. But you hold yourself to the heck together because there's persecution and law. So even though you're able to, you don't do it because you don't want to go to jail, unless it's horny jail. That one is fun. So let us go and explore the old religions, how some are still here, what kind of variety is out there, as well as the ones that are the mainstream right now. So genuinely, we have a lot of religions, and one of the whys I go into the religions is because we all at some point wish to believe in something. And as there is the lot of like previous topics we covered, eventually get to the point of like, but what else is there? Genuinely, what else is there? And that gets to the religions. Well, that's kind of like spirituality and all, but the religions first. So the eldest on the World Wide Web are claimed to be polytheism. Do apologize. Not one specific religion is the oldest form of practiced religion. So is often occurred in pagan practices that aim to worship a plethora of gods. Polytheism has influenced many prominent religions of today, including Hinduism. The earliest forms of polytheism took shape in Egyptian myths and were recorded in Sumerian tablets, which date back to 4000 BC and 3500 BC, respectively. Examples include the worship of multiple gods in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and Rome. For instance, the Greek god Aphrodite was the god of love, while Dionysus was the Greek god of wine. There's also Yahwism and Judaism. Originates from religion called Yahwism, which the Hebrew people practiced over 4,000 years ago. So there's a lot of different kinds of very old religions that came to be same as Hinduism, practiced in Southeast Asian countries like India. In fact, approximately 4 out of every 5 Indians affiliate with the Hindu religion. Religions like Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism have derived from the Hindu faith too, making Hinduism one of the world's oldest religions. There's also Confucianism. I'm butchering it, and I. So that is like a belief came directly from him, from his own philosophy. So a person claimed that teachings, he taught that reality was more than just the material world and that it was transcendent in nature. He believed 5 main principles should govern life. First, humanness and goodness came from practicing virtue and prioritizing relationships. Second, righteousness is crucial to humanity and friendship. As the third, Confucius promoted the importance of ritual and propriety in a celebration of events and the following of social norms. Also says that wisdom comes from knowledge, meaning these ideas are inseparable. Lastly, trustworthiness is crucial to credibility and the maintenance of relationships. Then there's also Buddhism. And yeah, each one of these, like Taoism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, there's also a lot of others, but each religion does exist because of its philosophy. So each religion has their own kind of like scriptures, book, something they kind of like use as their guide towards their belief system. And it's kind of funny how in certain books, because of the age and because of how many times it was translated, we all know that if you translate the book, and because of the person who translates the book, sometimes translations can be inaccurate, or a translator decides that this is not appropriate for this translation, so they cut out like parts of the original altogether because they don't think it's important, in their humble opinion. But that makes it so like the end, down the chain, years later, centuries later, and people read it and they think that's the thing. So I found it kind of fascinating that I read a few religious books, including Apocrypha, which was deemed like the heavily bad thing to read. And I was like, wait a minute. But it's not like it's bad though. Same with the Bible. For some reason, there's more and more interesting things coming up as the very old scripts of Bible are being translated, and things are being once again shed into light, that like translations, because there's I think over 72 different types of Bible out there, with their own kind of translation, kind of like the meanings and stuff. So it's interesting how it varies. At the same time, yeah, I got to be at some. I'll honestly say at some point I got heavily discombobulated with all the religions, and I did use the help of ChatGPT. So there you go. Popular or rather common religions worldwide. Christianity, over 2.3 billion people, and the founding figure, Jesus Christ. Revolves around the life and teachings of Jesus Christ, divided into various denominations with Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, and Eastern Orthodoxy. Being the major branches, Christians believe in Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and follow the Bible consisting of Old and New Testaments as their sacred text. Church services, baptism, and communion are integral to Christian worship. Christianity. Orthodox. When it comes to religion, there's one thing I would really like to share, and kind of like poke your mind with, is that if you came from a family which got to be highly religious, or like have a belief system they're like highly into, could be like a spiritual belief system, or religious belief system, or anything else for that matter. It's if it gets into the cult section, because that too is traumatizing. But if your family is a devout practitioner of some sort of religion, sometimes, most times, since you're a child, you're being immersed in these beliefs and these moments where you genuinely get exposed to these kind of like the rituals, the communions, the church services, the baptism. And frankly, when you start asking questions, nobody, for some reason, most people just don't seem to have answers. Or depending on where you're at, they might have answers, but they don't satisfy your curiosity. Or they might satisfy your curiosity, once again, depending on religion or belief system. So in my case, it was very messed up, because from when I was a kid, I'll explain now why it was messed up. When I was a kid, I got to be brought up partially with my grandmother being a Muslim. So there were like Muslim practices in our household because of her, because that's how she was raised. And to me, that kind of made sense, kind of made no bloody sense. And no matter when I would ask anything, I would get a reply that it's how it's meant to be, or it's how it's expected, which did not necessarily genuinely help. After a while, my grandmother decided to kind of like change religion because of my grandfather, because in kind of like grandfather's religion, if your spouse is not of the same religion, you cannot be buried on the same graveyard. So my nana went through the lengths of changing and like baptizing herself into the Russian Orthodox kind of like religion, and that switched the whole household on its toes. And all of a sudden, there were icons of these men, women, you know, saints, and you could no longer understand what's going on. It was like everybody's now wearing a cross, you know, because before it was like not mandatory, now it's mandatory. Then I was also pushed, my mom was pushed to get baptized, and I was pushed to get baptized, even though I could not freaking understand why. And there were kind of like these very heavy, kind of like pushing the religion onto you, which is in my humble opinion, quite toxic from a household. And that too kind of like impacts you as a child when you have that really kind of like religious setup in your house, and you have to obey by the rules and the teachings, and there's this and that. And I mean, some teachings are very cool, some others not so much. And in my case, I could not understand how in the book it would more be about how to, you know, help people, be nice to people, everything else, like the preaching of the goodness. And yet even within the religion, I would encounter, you know, the believers, situations like relatives who are a part, you know, of this belief system, would be absolutely horrendous. There's like the gossip, there's the abuse, there's the physical abuse, there's like, you know, the toxicity, and with all of that, I was genuinely wondering, why would you like get into the religion? And for most part, most of these people, they did not even read the book. They would just be like, oh yeah, that's what, you know, like he or she or they, you know, like grandmother or like this relative or uncle, aunt, you know, said, and that's what we believe in. And I'm like, but that's not correct. You know, you can all believe in like forgiveness, yet plot revenge, or, you know, be like it's just like juxtapositions on top of juxtapositions, because things would not make sense in my head. So that is also one of the reasons I went into kind of like seeking other, you know, checking out other belief systems, because I'm like, but, you know, how others practice stuff. And with my kind of like all over the place, I stumbled across the, you know, Buddhism as well. And I was like, well, that's fairly interesting. Sikh also was cool to read upon, and just like, you know, kind of like Quran was an interesting book to read. And I was like, that has something in there, pretty interesting. Then I stumbled across the Shinto religion, and even though it kind of like was nice in some sense, with how it portrayed the world, when you dig into like the history of making of certain religions, you understand that they were made to kind of like be a certain way. to indoctrinate people a certain way, because of certain times and certain situations during that, you know, period of history. And I was like, oh damn. So yeah, so genuinely, when your family is religious and you do not necessarily agree with the religion, it's kind of like an inside battle, inside struggle with your own family, to be like because explaining to them is pointless. They are not gonna listen, and that's like one of the things that's really annoying, because sometimes when you get, you know, like parents or relatives that have like, you know, a certain faith, and they allow you to have your own space in it, you know, and they'll be like, yeah, if you want to believe in it, if you don't, which is cool. But if you don't have such kind of, you know, like parents, and they just like, or relatives, and they just push that stuff onto you, it literally starts with this kind of like understanding. Okay, questions. There's like a lot of questions that pop up, and resistance, of course, because like, why would you like push this on me without explaining me why? and I genuinely did not like their explanations of like, oh, the God is gonna punish you. For what? For not believing? What is this, So I was literally like I had struggles with this kind of like baptism thing, and the most annoying part out of it all was my uncle, who would pressure me to wear a cross, and I hated wearing the cross. It was just like, I don't know, the feeling, like the icky feeling of it, like just I don't know, it was not nice, when you have to wear even like items that make you belong. If you do not choose it out of your own volition, and you're being pressurized into some things, that's very toxic. That's dysfunctional. That's not right. And for most part, that's borderline cold. So that's my side of the story, but here we go on. So there's a lot of like very highly popular religions, and some of them got my spidey senses tingling, because I was quite interested about some of the religions. For example, this one promotes the unity of all religions and humanity. Follow the teachings, who is considered a prophet and messenger of God. They emphasize the oneness of God and oneness of religion and the oneness of humanity, characterized by principles such as equality of men and women and the elimination of prejudice. Quite interesting. But genuinely, yeah, Shintoism is an indigenous Japanese religion that focuses on the worship of kami, which are spirits or deities found in nature. Shinto rituals and ceremonies often revolve around purification, and many Japanese people combine Shinto practices with other religions like Buddhism. African traditional religions also are one of the most interesting to me, actually. If you go into like the those religions to just like practices and belief systems, damn. I mean, even like if you go and dwell into like, we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so African traditional religions are diverse and reflect the beliefs and practices of various African cultures, often involve ancestor worship, animalism, and deep connection to nature. These religions vary widely from one to another. So lesser known religions and cults, because some things are more cults than they are religions. So some of these, it's kind of like what ChatGPT threw at me. But frankly, some of these can be shamanism practiced as cult or more like a spirituality. Some are like genuinely, absolutely mad. Order of the Solar Temple. So there's Universe People, Church of Flying Spaghetti Monster. It was for fun, okay? Neo-paganism. This also is like some very interesting things that are quite cool and not so much. But genuinely, cults. If religions, they have their own kind of like a manual thingy, which kind of like with the scriptures. But the one thing that I noticed is that these religious kind of like scriptures, some are quite obvious. They're like, do this, don't do this, this is bad, this is good. Some others like to interpret, like you're in school and your teacher gives you an assignment in literature class with the question of like, what did the author mean by this specific, book or, part or whatever, and you have to like create a meaning to whatever the author, wrote. So it's kind of like trying to find another, like the meaning underneath a meaning, when it's, that it's like one of the things I did not like in school as well, because some authors, they just write for the sake of writing it out, and it's quite obvious. It's like in your face, and that's exactly what they meant. And when you throw the same idea, exactly the same idea that the author meant, at your teacher, teachers have the tendency to say, but that is not what the author meant. And you're like, but how? Why? And same goes with religion sometimes, because you read it and you understand it one way, and your pastor, for example, reads the same thing and understands it the other way. Somebody else reads the same thing and understands it the third way around. And so on it goes, and so on it creates like misunderstandings, mishaps, and like the clash of interests, genuinely. So depends on the one who's interpreting. Also cults. So I really love how politically correct and sensitive ChatGPT is. Give me a second. Because I think with religions, there is also one thing that I forgot to get into. Is that, yeah, because there's a lot of religions, as you can see in here. And it's like the cults and religions, and there's just like the religions. Yeah. Christianity. The one thing I still, yeah, it's like Christianity is one of the biggest ones. But I lately have found it quite amusing that the Christianity itself, just like Rosicrucians, just like Protestants and many others, sort of use similar books but different interpretations. Or like with Rosicrucians, and I mean Gnostics had like the best thus far, kind of like coolest books about like the making of the world and what to do. Thus far for me, it's kind of like, I don't know why, but like for most part, every book that's even religious, I read it as fiction, because it's kind of like interesting to see how like people get to be like prophets and hear the word of God. But frankly, I think maybe not all of it is the word of God. And right now online, there's a lot of conspiracy theories, ideas, and genuinely kind of like approaches towards it, thinking like, hey, maybe this is not what happened. And it's kind of interesting how some religions tend to be like, I wouldn't say outed, but the not so great parts are kind of like flashed out more, that this is not appropriate, this is not nice, and this is not like what's like what's been preached in the books, or what exactly has been preached. Why don't we return to that with like poking the eye out, cutting the like leg or arm off, if in case of then this, because some people are like devout believers in some things, which escalates situations. But genuinely, religions are there to, I would say, give us some ideas into like what we could choose to believe in. And even with the religions or belief systems in general, there was one interesting person I saw online who said that their parents, when they were younger, told them to genuinely just like go check out all the religions out there, like just like see what's out there, and basically have your pick. It's not like the parents were like pushing the person to believe in anything particular, but they gave the freedom of choice, which I think is the best thing for any person out there, to like be able to have a free choice of what to believe in, which is like, cool. And with religions, and if you have a family that's within a certain religion, you kind of meet the situation where they push it onto you, or they try to push values onto you. And some of them are pretty, well, depending on what they believe in, some are good, not so much. Very far from it. But yeah, some of these are quite decent. I mean, the most chill ones, like calmer side of things, which I observed over the years, would be the Buddhism, because they're just like, you know, they're fairly calm with their stuff. You know, they don't pressure anybody into it, and it's kind of still weird to me how some religions try to push people or antagonize people or just kind of like draw people into their religion. Same happens with cults, but let's get on with cults a little bit more later on.